My name is Ray Giardini. I'm a professor at CILE in the College of Islamic Studies, and I'll just be moderating this introductory session. So I welcome you all to this, which is the CILE's 9th International Conference, which is being conducted in collaboration with Freie University in Berlin. And the conference theme this year is Islamic Virtue Ethics, Historical Trajectories and Modern Implications. I want to thank everybody for their participation. I want to thank the CILE team for all of the arrangements and organizing of this conference. Just to introduce the introductory session, first speaker will be Dr. Ahmad Shaheen, who is the Dean of the College of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University, and is also the Acting Director of CILE, the Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics. He has taught in leading universities in the United States, including Harvard, Notre Dame, Georgetown, George Washington, and Boston universities. His research and teaching interests focus on Islam and politics, comparative politics, democracy, and political reform in Muslim societies. Previously, Dr. Shaheen was the interim provost at HBKU and a distinguished visiting scholar at Columbia University, and a public policy scholar at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. And we welcome him to open this conference. Dr. Gudrun Kramer is Professor Emerita of Islamic Studies at the Free University Berlin. We very much welcome her to this conference and thank her for the collaboration in establishing it. She was formerly the director of the Berlin Graduate School of Muslim Cultures and Societies. She is the principal investigator of the Berlin-based Excellence Cluster Contestations of the Liberal Script, a member of the Berlin Brandenburg Academy of Sciences and the National Research Council, as well as the executive editor of the Encyclopedia of Islam 3, which is published by Brill. She's published widely on the history of the Middle East since the early modern period, Islamic reform, Islamic political thought and activism, and more recently on Islamic responses to secularization and secularity. And the third speaker who will introduce the conference in more detail, Dr. Mu'taz Al-Khatib, who is an Associate Professor of Islamic Moral Philosophy here at CILE, and he's the coordinator of the MA program in Applied Islamic Ethics in the College of Islamic Studies. Dr. Al-Khatib has delivered lectures on Islamic ethics in many universities around the world, including Oxford, Cambridge, Princeton, Florida, Berkeley School of Law, Tübingen, Osnabrück, and others. He is an editorial board member of the Journal of Islamic Ethics and the book series Studies in Islamic Ethics, and has edited a number of books and published over 30 academic articles in Arabic and in English. And so without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Ahmad, please. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much, Professor Ray. I will just give brief opening remarks, as you mentioned, and I really appreciate your kind introduction. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon to all the speakers, colleagues, and attendees who are joining us online today. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 9th edition of the International Conference of the Research Center of Islamic Legislation and Ethics, CILE. My name is Ahmad Shaheen. I'm the Acting Director of CILE and the Dean of the College of Islamic Studies at Hamad bin Khalifa University. Today, we have tuned in to deliberate the topic of Islamic virtue ethics, spanning our history and its modern-day realizations. We look forward to engaging into this discussion along with our conference partner, the Institute of Islamic Studies at the Free University of Berlin. We cherish these opportunities to disseminate critical research on understudied topics alongside such prominent institutional partners to the wider academic community. As such, the topic today is one of the several areas that CILE has explored and continues to explore when looking at different disciplines that are touched by the field of Islamic ethics. These include, and are not limited to, front-page practical issues including bioethics, artificial intelligence, politics, migration, and human rights. I'm also delighted to share some critical works of CILE in this field, in addition to its research fora, which include Scopus Index, Open Access Journal of Islamic Ethics, published by Brill, an open access book series, Studies in Islamic Ethics, also published by Brill, thematic issues of the journal that are produced from such research fora as we are in today. These have included edited volumes on topics such as Islamic ethics and the genome question, migration and Islamic ethics, and Islamic ethics and the trusteeship paradigm. At last but not least, CILE's contribution to the development and delivery of one of our newest programs and a global first Masters in Islamic Ethics here at CIS HPQ. At CILE, we have multiple avenues through which to engage scholars and students alike, such as in our thematic summer and winter schools. We also encourage interested researchers to submit proposals for research projects for CILE's open call for funding opportunities on the website. As always, our mission remains to boldly dive into Islamic ethics, into Islamic ethics related research areas, and continue to advance a deep understanding and exploration of our Islamic ethical traditions. Finally, I wish to conclude by thanking all my colleagues at CILE for organizing this important conference and wish you a successful and productive 2 days. Thank you.
Dr. Ahmad, thank you very much for this introduction. Now I'd like to call on Dr. Gudrun Kramer for her opening remarks. The floor is yours, Dr. Kramer.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well, even if I don't raise my voice to the fullest potential?
I can hear you very well, thank you, and we can see.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words on behalf of Freie Universität Berlin, and more specifically, of course, my colleague Birgit Krawietz and myself from the Institute of Islamic Studies. I think quite a few of the participants in this meeting are familiar with Berlin, which as the capital of the country hosts a number of institutions and individuals working on what is broadly defined as Islam, the Islamic tradition, including moral and ethical questions, the Middle East, the wider Islamic world, etc., from the universities to networks such as Europe and the Middle East, or the Forum for Trans-Regional Studies, the Graduate School, Muslim Cultures and Societies, and in particular, I would say Freie Universität. If I may, in parentheses, we say Freie Universität because if you say Free University, some people are led to believe that it is a private institution, which is it is not. It is a state-funded national university. So Freie Universität has been an excellence university for the past 15 years, and we try, of course, to live up to this reputation with our modest contributions to scholarship and research. In practical issues of preparing this conference, we have not been involved. Here, our thanks go to the excellent staff of CILE. We have contributed to a certain extent to preparing the background paper and some of the conceptual issues to be addressed in this meeting. One of our core concerns, and I say our, even though CILE is of course the main agent here, one of our core concerns is of course to explore the possibilities of identifying a genuinely Islamic way of being an ethical person and of acting accordingly in diverse contexts and in a structured manner, of course. Much of the relevant research is grounded in philosophy, law, theology, and various combinations of these intellectual traditions and their distinctive methods and approaches. We think that adab should be given a significant role in this venture, and as soon as we talk about adab, of course, we should also think of our colleagues in literary and cultural studies, who perhaps are not always as tensely and densely involved in this quest for Islamic ethics as one might hope. I'm not putting the blame on anybody, it's just an idea that perhaps we could benefit from closer cooperation here. Much of those who have contributed to the Islamic ethics project in its diversity have focused on conceptual issues, and I would say rightly so, conceptual issues, and that applies even to applied ethics. Much of the work in the conceptual field, I think, is devoted to pre-modern notions of ethics, wide and tight. Perhaps it's in the field of bioethics, environmental issues, and to a lesser extent, the social responsibility of business that the modern period has been more closely involved in this conceptual research, which is, I think, absolutely fundamental to this quest. But there's another angle, and this angle calls for people involved in, I would say, mainly history and the social sciences, and here I would, with some audacity, include political science, and that is to ask for the who and the where and the why. Who is involved in this quest? Who is authorized or thought to be authorized to speak on the relevant issues? To whom does it matter? What are the sites of exploration? And even the pre-modern period, the sites were not restricted to religious sites, be it mosques, churches, synagogues, or temples. Have these sites shifted in the modern period? What can we say on that particular angle? And of course, the why. Why should we ask this question in the first place? And in the modern period in particular, I think any search for anything considered Islamic is deeply enmeshed in debates about authenticity, purity, and identity politics of one kind or another. Now, the organizers of this meeting have not fallen into what I would call the purity trap, looking for an Islamic concept undiluted and unpolluted by alien concepts. The weight given to Greek and Hellenistic thought and the encounter with Greek and Hellenistic thinkers and thought speaks for this concern and the awareness and the relevance given to it. And I greatly look forward to the papers to be given in that particular field. The background paper also mentions Confucianism, and I would be delighted if in a future meeting, perhaps we could hear more about that tradition, not least because it is a moral and ethical and philosophical tradition not rooted or grounded in belief in a personal God. And yet it has given us ethical and moral concepts which, in my view, are closely comparable to Islamic and Christian and Jewish concepts of ethics. I've myself dabbled in that field, and perhaps at some point there will be the opportunity to contribute in a more structured way. I would be very glad to see greater emphasis given to the Persian and Iranian tradition of ethical and moral thought, which has been included in research into adab, but has been largely restricted to that particular niche. And perhaps it would be an idea to open our eyes towards the East even more than before, because it's so far been fairly strongly fixed on the West. But today, this is not immediately on our desk. I very much look forward to this meeting, to hearing colleagues that are old friends, some that are familiar faces, some I have read but never met, and others I have neither read nor met, but look forward to doing both. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Kremer. It was a very nice introduction and call for more avenues of attention. Finally, I'd like to introduce our dear colleague, Dr. Mu'taz Al-Khatib, to introduce the conference.
Thank you very much, Professor Ray. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, can't see
Okay.
you. Oh, there you are.
Can't see me. Okay. Thanks for your introduction, and thanks for Dr. Ahmad and Dr. Gordon Kremer. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all to the 9th edition of the CILE International Conference on Islamic Virtue Ethics, Historical Trajectories and Modern Implications. In this short introduction, I would like to address 4 main points, namely the concept, the interplay of virtue and ethics in the Islamic tradition, the new turn to virtue ethics, and finally, the conference themes and sessions. The history of virtue ethics as part of the scholarly inquiry within the broad field of ethics has quite early roots. Additionally, virtue ethics is currently one of 3 major approaches in normative ethics, namely deontology, which emphasizes duties or rules, consequentialism, which emphasizes the consequences of actions, virtue ethics, which emphasizes the virtues or moral character. Central concepts of virtue ethics revolve around the excellence of character and the ultimate ends, as fleshed out in various canons of virtues. It focuses on how such virtues help people lead a good life to achieve ultimate goals, treat themselves, and do the same for others inside and outside their communities. In classical Arab Islamic philosophy, as mainly represented by Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Averroes, moral virtue constituted the larger whole, while ethics was viewed as a minor aspect of moral conduct, as something which relates to the habits and character traits which ought to be developed so that an individual can act according to the dictates of right reason. Because classical Arab Muslim philosophers viewed the human soul as something rational and the end of human life as theoretical excellence, all of the other virtues or excellences are ordered so as to contribute to that end. Recently, more explicit conversations on virtue ethics have produced several studies situated within scholarly disciplines like Islamic theology, Sufism, and philosophy. Additionally, the works of the Moroccan philosopher Taha Abdul Rahman on moral theory, especially the so-called trusteeship paradigm or entrustment, al-i'timaniya, and other related moral concepts, al-mafahim al-akhlaqiyya, have stirred a wide resurgence of studies on virtue ethics in both Arabic and English. Historically speaking, Western moral discourse has moved from a concern with meta-ethics to a concern with normative ethics, and more recently to applied ethics, where an increasing number of publications deal with a wide range of fields like professions, bioethics, environment, politics, migration, sports, business, normative codes of behavior beyond state law, interreligious relations, strategies of self-development, languages of emotion, etc. They built not only on the philosophical heritage rooted in late antiquity, but also on a broad range of Islamic scholarly disciplines and related practices. Today, however, virtue and ethics are viewed differently. Charles Butterworth, 1980s, that virtue is usually considered as part of ethics, and the emphasis within ethics is placed on rights and duties or obligation theory. Our attention is no longer centered on the ordering of human life according to a comprehensive and overriding and conceived as the good for man, qua rational being. Rather, we occupy ourselves with the so-called intuition of moral principles, with our willingness to universalize the maxim of our action, or with the maximization by our actions of preferred outcomes. Thereby, we no longer address the problem of what ends are worth living for. The modern turn to virtue ethics in the Western discourse began with the publication of Anscombe's Modern Moral Philosophy in 1958, argued that both the ontological and utilitarian approaches to ethics relied upon theologically derived notions of obligation, which many people no longer find compelling, and that the only alternative to such theories was virtue ethics. With the publication of After Virtue Ethics by Alistair McIntyre, the study of virtue ethics regained prominence in philosophical circles. In the 1999, the terrain shifted again with On Virtue Ethics by Rosalind Hursthouse. On the other hand, many philosophers criticized this shift because they wanted to keep the center on the morality of actions, not the moral characters of the agents. And virtue ethics has no direct role to play in addressing practical questions. Modern historians examined ethics in the rich Islamic moral tradition, but with almost exclusive focus on theological and normative ethics, mainly on ethics of actions. Modern scholarship concerning the ethics of the Quran or Sunnah has mainly been concerned with the ontological and theological dimensions. The main exception was Izotsu's analysis of what he called ethical religious concepts of the Quran, which shares many aspects and presumptions with virtue ethics. Against this background, the edition of our international conference is meant to fill in important gaps in modern scholarship on ethics and how it relates to the virtue ethics within the Islamic tradition. This conference covers various themes, including virtues and vices, virtue ethics exemplars and models, virtue ethics philosophy, law and theology, virtues and applied ethics. Due to various factors related to the unavailability of some academic researchers and the logistic difficulties created by the current pandemic, some important themes could not be covered in the proceedings of this event, and we are aware of these areas, such as adab and other areas, because we already addressed and invited so many scholars that unfortunately many of them were unable to attend this conference at the moment. So, however, we do hope that we will be able to cover additional themes while working on the prospective publication plan. Keeping in mind that our focus in the center is on Islamic ethics and its interrelations or interactions with other traditions. The conference will also showcase the work of our graduate students within the MA program of Applied Islamic Ethics. So the last session of the conference is dedicated to the work of the students who conducted research on topics related to virtue ethics. The proceedings of the conference will result in a thematic issue in the peer-reviewed Journal of Islamic Ethics and/or an edited volume in the peer-reviewed book series, Studies in Islamic Ethics, both published by Brill. Finally, I would like to thank our partners at the Institute of Islamic Studies at the Freie Universität, Berlin, represented here by Professor Gudrun Kramer and Professor Birgit Kravitz, and participants for accepting our invitation and being part of this project. Thanks also for my colleagues in CILE for their help and dedicated support. The floor is yours, Dr. Ray.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martaz. That was a very, very nice introduction, I think, to the conference. The schedule does indicate a break here. I'm not sure if we need a break, if we want to go on, or just take a few moments to look at the program. But my role is finished here now, so I'm going to be handing over to our dear colleague, Professor Ibrahim Zain, who will be moderating the next, the first substantive session on virtues and vices.